What happens when confidence becomes controversy, when swagger isn't just questioned but criminalized? That's the firestorm that erupted around Shedeur Sanders, the rising star quarterback and son of NFL legend Deion Sanders, after a single viral image lit the internet on fire. A media personality went too far. Another stood up. And in the middle of it all, a quiet war over who's allowed to be confident and who is. This wasn't about plays on the field. It wasn't about draft grades or quarterback stats. This was about culture, power, control, and the way America still decides who gets to lead and what leadership is supposed to look like. Because when one critic compared Shedeur and Coach Prime to public enemy number one, literally placing prison bars and crosshairs over their faces, the response wasn't just outrage, it was a wake-up call. And one former NFL quarterback didn't hold back when it came time to fire back. But what really caused this moment to explode wasn't just one bad take. It was what came next, the uncomfortable truth that's been hiding in plain sight for years. And once it hit the surface, there was no going back. It all started with a picture. A single, carefully designed image that took seconds to post, but set off a storm that still hasn't settled. Jason Whitlock, a media veteran known for his controversial takes, hit the internet with a harsh visual. A graphic comparing Deion Sanders and his son Shedeur to an old Public Enemy album cover. The irony? That original album cover was a protest. A warning to the world about societal injustice and racial inequality. But in Whitlock's version, it became something far more sinister, featuring Shedeur, a college quarterback, framed behind prison bars in crosshairs like a criminal. That wasn't criticism. That was a message disguised as media. And it was one most people didn't take lightly. The imagery didn't just feel provocative, it felt targeted. In an era where young black quarterbacks are already under a microscope, this wasn't just an opinion. This was branding. Now the questions weren't about gameplay or stats, they were about identity. About how far the conversation is willing to go when it's not comfortable with someone who refuses to shrink himself for approval. Shaun King didn't hesitate. As soon as that graphic hit, the former NFL quarterback went scorched earth, calling Whitlock's post reckless, dangerous, and intentionally inflammatory. But it wasn't just outrage. King broke it all down with precision. Public Enemy wasn't about criminal behavior, it was about resistance and survival. Taking imagery rooted in protest and repurposing it to imply criminality wasn't a critique, it was a distortion. A way to paint confidence as threat. And just like that, a cultural line got drawn. But Whitlock didn't apologize. In fact, he leaned into it. He doubled down, arguing that hip-hop culture had no place at the quarterback position. According to him, the NFL demands discipline, structure, and submission, and anyone who brings rebellion or individuality into that environment is doomed to fail. His claim, that black quarterbacks like Shedeur struggle not because of bias, but because they refuse to submit to coaching authority. And then he tossed out a stat like a smoke bomb. 8 of the top 9 quarterbacks by record this season are white. As if that alone proved his argument. As if success in one season somehow erased years, decades of history, context, and contradiction. As if culture goes no further than a box score. Shaun King wasn't having it. In fact, he knew exactly where to press. He dismantled the argument at its root, reminding people of a truth they live every day. Hip-hop isn't rebellion anymore, not in the way Whitlock framed it. It's not a fringe thing. It's the most dominant cultural force in America. It's played in every locker room, every car, every algorithm from downtown to suburbia. It's parents and kids doing TikToks to the same songs that get athletes judged on Sundays. The problem? It's not the culture, it's who's expressing it. When Shedeur wears a chain, it's a character concern. When he celebrates a touchdown with confidence, he's called cocky. But when Jackson Dart wears ice or JJ McCarthy dances after a game, it's leadership. It's swagger. It's just boys being boys. Black quarterbacks aren't judged harder for what they do. They're judged differently for how they look while doing it. And it didn't stop there. King pointed out the other side of the coin, how players like Lamar Jackson have taken endless heat for daring to be themselves, for wearing grills, for having fun, for not fitting the good soldier image, all while white quarterbacks do the same things without criticism. The measuring stick doesn't move, it splits entirely. But the most brutal part of King's rebuttal wasn't the cultural clapback. It was what he said about the system itself. He exposed something deeper than just labeling. He called out the industry's inability to separate swag from skill, image from intelligence, and culture from capability. Because at the heart of Whitlock's message was an old belief pretending to be new, that you have to change who you are in order to succeed. That visibility, especially as a black quarterback, means risk. That confidence without apology equals danger. For some, it's just football. But for players like Shedeur and others who walk onto a field balancing not just pressure but perception, it's never just about the game. It's about whether you belong and whether people are ready to accept how you belong. What made Whitlock's argument collapse wasn't its lack of logic, it was its hypocrisy. He called Jackson Dart flashy, but not rebellious. But why? Why didn't the same behavior equal the same label? Because when you strip back the stats, the sound bites, and the surface-level debate, you're left with a much harder truth. This was never really about football. It was about control, about deciding who gets to win and be loud about it. Whether Whitlock meant it or not, his take told a much bigger story. One where confidence gets confused with audacity and personality triggers discomfort. Where young black quarterbacks aren't just expected to perform, they're expected to perform a version of themselves that makes others comfortable. And that expectation, it's not just exhausting, it's systemic. Shaun King didn't just clap back for clicks. He struck a chord because this conversation has been brewing beneath the surface for years. This image, this debate, this moment cracked it wide open, not because it was new, but because it was finally visible. And once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. Because the question now isn't just why that image was posted. The real question is why so many people felt comfortable sharing it. The image may have gone viral, but it was the idea behind it that really lit the fire. Jason Whitlock didn't just criticize Shedeur Sanders. He tried to connect his identity, his presence, and his culture to failure. Not bad games, not poor development, but failure by default. Because in Whitlock's eyes, confidence paired with hip-hop energy, that wasn't just a red flag. It was a death sentence for a quarterback. According to Whitlock, being successful at quarterback requires something simple: submission to the coach, to the team, to the system. And by that standard, Shedeur and others like him were doomed the moment they stepped on the field with diamond chains and their own voice. This wasn't a debate between stats. It was a clash between cultures. Whitlock framed it like this: the NFL is built like the military. You follow orders, you blend in, you represent a bigger whole, and you check your ego at the door. But then came a new generation of quarterbacks who didn't fit that mold, and more importantly, weren't trying to. They weren't loud for no reason. They weren't reckless. But they also weren't shrinking to make people comfortable. To Whitlock, that looked like rebellion. To Shaun King, it looked like reality. Because here's what Whitlock refused to see or admit: hip-hop isn't noise. It's not just performance or rebellion. It's a playbook in itself. It's storytelling, branding, movement, energy. It's how you talk to a generation that doesn't watch SportsCenter, that doesn't grow up idolizing silent pocket passers in film rooms, but connects through personality, influence, and visibility. So King wasn't defending disrespect. He was defending evolution. He made the point that hip-hop culture today isn't confined to black communities or athletes. It's everywhere. Suburbs, TikTok, Super Bowl stages, everyone pulls from it. So when Shedeur walks in with the same energy that white athletes quietly copy behind the scenes, why does it suddenly become a problem? That's where the mask starts slipping. Because Whitlock's argument had nothing to do with football IQ or mechanics. It was about comfort. Who makes the audience comfortable? Who follows the script? And for decades, the NFL script has quietly asked one thing from young black quarterbacks: earn your spot, walk quiet, show no flex until we say you can. What makes King's perspective so difficult to ignore is that he's lived both sides of this argument. He was that quarterback back in 1999 when black QBs were starting to break through, but only if they left everything personal at the door. He watched players mute their personalities just to be accepted. He lived through being told that the position wasn't just about throwing, it was about fitting a mold, one that conveniently never included authenticity unless it came with a Super Bowl ring attached. And that's why this debate didn't just hit hard, it hit deep. Because the request wasn't play better, it was be less. When Whitlock claimed Shedeur showed signs of being uncoachable, he pointed to one moment: his supposed unwillingness to submit in a pre-draft conversation with NFL coaches. Nothing about play breakdowns, nothing about film sessions, just personality, just tone. Imagined or real, that alone became evidence of whether or not he was fit to succeed. The irony? Whitlock didn't realize he was doing the exact thing he claimed to oppose, reducing a quarterback not by ability, but by attitude. Not by stats, but by swagger. Meanwhile, King was calling out the real double standard, how visible confidence only turns into a headline when it's worn by someone black. How pizzazz becomes a problem when it comes from the wrong background, and how swagger is a leadership trait until it doesn't come wrapped in Midwest values and family man image branding. And what stings even more? The fact that many of the NFL's most elite quarterbacks made their name by doing exactly what Shedeur is being criticized for. Tom Brady was labeled stiff and unathletic. Aaron Rodgers, cold and arrogant. Brett Favre, reckless and wild. Patrick Mahomes, too flashy. All of them were doubted. All of them were told they weren't right for the mold. And yet, each of them leaned into who they were. They didn't shrink themselves, they simply performed so well that authenticity became endearing. So why is authenticity punished when it shows up in a different color? The real split in this debate isn't about football. It's about fear. Fear of losing tradition. Fear of letting go of a league built on silent soldiers and replacing it with voices hellbent on being seen, heard, and respected. What Whitlock calls rebellion, King calls progress. What some call a distraction, others recognize as a new version of leadership, one rooted in visibility, personal branding, and emotional intelligence. Because here's the truth. In 2025, leading a football team requires more than just quiet focus. It takes communication, relatability, and presence. These athletes are walking brands, CEOs of their personal platforms. And if the NFL wants to keep growing, keep connecting with a fan base that values personality as much as precision, it needs quarterbacks who bring all of themselves to the field, not just their arm strength. King wasn't defending chaos. He was defending adaptability. He was defending players who understand the modern game isn't just one on the field. It's one with visibility, with connection, with energy that transforms programs like Deion did at Jackson State and Colorado. What they've built doesn't happen by accident. It happens because they understand the system and use it. That's not rebellion. That's chess. Strategic, forward-thinking chess in a game that's still trying to play checkers. The clash between Whitlock and King wasn't just a viral spat. It was a full-on collision between two different blueprints for what a quarterback should represent. One still rooted in comfort and silence, the other shaped by evolution, expression, and innovation. And no matter how hard some try to rewind the clock, the league isn't going backwards. Because what's coming next doesn't look like the past. It talks different, moves louder, and refuses to hide just to get accepted. The game has always been judged by more than just talent. That's the unspoken reality beneath the NFL's carefully managed image. What looks like a meritocracy on the surface often twists into something more complicated the moment you dig into who gets grace, who gets labeled, and who has to earn respect twice just to stand in the same room. Swagger has never been the problem. In fact, swagger is a requirement at quarterback. The greats have always had it, and no one seemed to complain when they did. Brett Favre played like a gunslinger with nothing to lose, recklessly launching the ball downfield and calling it confidence. Aaron Rodgers stared reporters down and openly challenged his front office, and it was branded as leadership with edge. Tom Brady screamed in teammates, faces, and slammed tablets on the sideline, and fans called it passion. But when a young black quarterback shows emotion, expresses pride, or dares to put on a chain during warm-ups, it's suddenly a discipline problem, a red flag, a concern. No one said that out loud. They didn't have to, it's coded into the language. A white quarterback is competitive. A black quarterback is cocky. A white quarterback is outspoken. A black quarterback is immature. When Baker Mayfield planted a flag at Ohio State and grabbed his crotch on the sideline, media outlets called it fire, edge, swagger. When Cam Newton dabbed in the end zone, danced in celebration, or rocked gold cleats, it turned into think pieces about respect, role models, and knowing your place. It's not about celebration, it's about who's allowed to celebrate. That's the part of the argument Jason Whitlock either can't see or refuses to address. Because from his perspective, respect is something you earn by staying quiet, staying in line, and avoiding the spotlight until someone gives you permission. But if you look at how the league actually works today, that path doesn't exist anymore. More importantly, it never really worked for everyone in the first place. Shaun King made it clear, what's being labeled as rebellion from Shedeur isn't disrespect. It's visibility, it's influence, it's strategy. Because Deion and Shedeur Sanders didn't get here by playing small. They rose by embracing a truth most athletes are too scared to live fully. You don't just perform on the field anymore, you perform in the culture. And right now, the culture rewards attention more than ever. That's not arrogance. That's understanding the algorithm. Yet somehow, when the Sanders family does it, it's a problem. When they take the same blueprint that marketable white quarterbacks have been using for years, photo shoots, nicknames, style, social media, endorsements, it becomes ego. It becomes too much. It becomes bad for the locker room. But when J.J. McCarthy does it with Harley-Davidson vibes and diamond chain energy, it's branding genius. Jordan Travis wears custom suits and it's NFL-ready swagger. Nobody questions their humility. Nobody demands they tone it down. The double standard isn't subtle, it's loud. Whitlock unintentionally proved this himself when he criticized Lamar Jackson for wearing a grill, while ignoring the fact that dozens of white athletes do the same and get zero attention for it. He called Shedeur self-appointed for saying he'd be legendary, yet praised quarterbacks in the past for having that alpha mentality early in their careers. Same confidence, same ambition, different reaction. It all comes down to discomfort. The kind that happens when a black athlete doesn't ask for permission to be visible, when they don't soften their edges, when they don't wait to be branded, they brand themselves. But maybe that's exactly why it bothers them. Because the Sanders family didn't accidentally stumble into relevance. They built a machine. Deion transformed Jackson's state into a priority destination on raw charisma and results. Then he did the same at Colorado, recruiting talent, building buzz, generating ticket sales, headlines, national coverage, and bringing his sons along for the ride not because of favoritism, but because of production. Shedeur didn't just inherit attention, he earned it. And when the spotlight got hot, he didn't run from it, he leaned into it. Some people loved it. Others called it disrespectful. And that division says everything. It's not just about whether a quarterback is good at football. It's whether people feel comfortable with how he's good. That's why criticism around Shedeur became so personal so fast. Because he's loud in a league that still wants players who follow outdated rules of conduct. Walk in quiet, don't celebrate too soon, nod and smile when asked about shortcomings, especially if you haven't proven anything yet. But here's the real contradiction. Even when he did prove something, leading game-winning drives, throwing bombs, dominating in college, the narrative didn't shift. The target just got bigger, because this was never just about play. It was about presence. And that's what makes this conversation so uncomfortable for so many people. Because if they admit there's a double standard, they also have to admit the system is flawed. And if the system is flawed, then everything built on that flaw starts to feel less fair, less pure, less football. But whether they like it or not, authenticity is winning. The players who are succeeding today, Lamar, Mahomes, Josh Allen, Justin Fields, Caleb Williams, and yes, Shedeur, aren't shrinking themselves to fit the old mold. They're bringing who they are to the game, not checking it at the door. Their background, their culture, their voice, it's not a distraction. It's part of the brand now, part of leadership, part of how they relate to teammates, fans, and the moment. That's not chaos, that's evolution. And the ones who understand it aren't destroying the quarterback position, they are redefining it. Shaun King wasn't just throwing opinions. He wasn't reacting for clout. He was speaking from scars, ones that never fully disappeared, because he's been here before. Long before Twitter threads and viral takes, King lived through the silent rules that shaped his entire career. And when he opened up about what happened to him in the NFL, it didn't feel like an argument. It felt like a warning. He entered the league in 1999, part of a class that quietly shifted the quarterback landscape. For the first time in history, multiple black quarterbacks were drafted into starting caliber roles. Donovan McNabb, Achilles Smith, Daunt Culpepper, Aaron Brooks, Shaun King, Michael Bishop. A full wave of talent that could throw, run, think, and win by any standard. But even then, there was a catch. They weren't just expected to play quarterback, they were expected to conform. To lower their voice, to shed any trace of culture that didn't look like the traditional leader prototype. It wasn't written in any playbook, it was whispered, implied, enforced through subtle consequences. According to King, you couldn't just be, you had to submit. You had to say the right things, act the right way, look the part, play it safe. Any hint of individuality was seen as arrogant. Any expression of confidence without a playoff win was considered threatening. Sound familiar? It was the same script Shedeur's being handed now, just updated with hashtags and podcast clips. But here's the difference. Back then, black quarterbacks didn't have options. There was no building your own brand, no social media to amplify your voice. The only strategy was to blend in or get benched, and for a lot of players, that meant losing what made them great in the first place. Shaun King didn't blame Shedeur Sanders for standing tall. He respected it. But he also wanted him to understand the tax. Because the truth is, the NFL didn't evolve because it suddenly became more thoughtful or progressive. It changed because it had no other choice. The college scene forced the league's hand. The wave of quarterbacks dominating Saturdays no longer looked like traditional pro-style passers. They were mobile, creative, unpredictable. They were expressive, emotional, and magnetic, and they were winning. If the NFL wanted to compete with what fans were watching in college, it had to open the door, even if it did so reluctantly. But that change came with tension. Because while the system allowed more black quarterbacks to start, it never fully accepted them unless they checked certain boxes. Be dynamic, but not too loud. Be confident, but not self-declared. Be marketable, but not polarizing. Celebrate your culture, but only in ways we're comfortable with. As King explained, the NFL is still rooted in a military-style mentality. It's top-down, obedience-driven. The team comes first, and individuality comes second, if at all. But here's the irony. The NFL's biggest stars are rarely the ones who stayed quiet. They were the ones who led with full presence, full voice, and full identity. So why is it still so hard to let black quarterbacks lead the same way? That's the gap King exposed, and the one Whitlock tried to look past. King wasn't naive. He wasn't pretending Shedeur had played a flawless game or made perfect decisions. He acknowledged that calling yourself legendary before earning an NFL snap can absolutely rub people the wrong way. That walking into pre-draft meetings with a vibe that suggests you've already arrived can create resistance. But he also pointed out the part that never makes it into the segments or social posts. Most young quarterbacks make mistakes. Most rub people the wrong way at some point. The difference is, not all of them get punished the same. Shedeur isn't the first rookie to be confident. He's not the first to think he's the answer. But his confidence comes attached to history, to race, to legacy, to his last name. And that means every word, every gesture, every Instagram post gets framed not as motivation, but as entitlement. And that framing, it sticks harder than facts. King wanted people to understand that there's a difference between immaturity and identity, between being uncoachable and being unapologetic. Yes, quarterbacks need humility. Yes, they need to respect the process, master the system, and put in the work. But none of that should require them to erase who they are. Because here's the risk. When you force young athletes to hide behind silence, you strip away the confidence they'll need when the storm comes. And at quarterback, the storm always comes. There will be losses. There will be bad reads. There will be criticism louder than any podcast or social feed. In those low moments, confidence is survival. Swagger isn't a distraction, it's protection. And if a quarterback's personality makes people uneasy before he's even played a snap, maybe the problem isn't the personality, it's the expectation. King's response didn't sugarcoat it. He never said Shedeur will be a guaranteed success. He didn't paint him as a victim. What he demanded was space. Space for a young black quarterback to develop without being demonized for expressing the very qualities the NFL claims to value: leadership, vision, ambition, belief. That space is still a luxury given more freely to others. So when Whitlock described Shedeur and Deion as public enemy number one, King saw what it really meant. It wasn't a football critique. It was a message that certain people still make folks uncomfortable when they don't shrink. That the image of a confident young black man determined to own his light is still unsettling in some rooms. But this time, King pushed back, not for optics, not for clicks, but because this debate has gone unchecked long enough and someone had to say it. Confidence builds stars, but in the NFL, the wrong kind of confidence can burn them alive. And nobody knows that better than a rookie quarterback walking into a league where the rules look equal on paper but feel dangerously uneven in practice. Shedeur Sanders has been hailed, criticized, branded, and second-guessed, and he hasn't even taken an NFL snap. Not because he's underprepared, but because he showed up fully formed. A quarterback who knows who he is, what he wants, and where he's going. And for some people, that's the real problem. Shaun King didn't say Shedeur was flawless. He didn't defend every comment, every post, every moment of bravado. In fact, he pointed to one of the biggest tension points directly, that legendary quote. The one where Shedeur called himself legendary before even being named a starter at the NFL level. That one clip was replayed, reposted, recycled endlessly, used as proof by critics that this kid didn't get it. That he was too focused on image, too full of himself, too arrogant to be coached, but King flipped the lens. He didn't excuse the quote, he explained it. What if that statement wasn't arrogance? What if it was armor? Because when you grow up in the spotlight, the son of one of the most polarizing athletes in modern sports history, confidence isn't optional. It's a shield. It's how you survive people rooting for your failure before your first drive. And when every throw is dissected, every handshake turned into body language analysis, that armor isn't just for show, it's for survival. The truth is, quarterback is the most politicized position in all of sports. You don't just have to be smart, strong, and skilled. You have to be strategic. You have to know when to speak, how to answer questions, how to walk the tightrope between presence and humility. And when you're Black, that tightrope is razor thin. Walk too quietly, you're not a leader. Walk too boldly, you're seen as a threat. The moment Shedeur walked in with his shoulders high and his name loud, the clock started ticking on how long people would wait before labeling him difficult. And it didn't take long. Pre-draft meetings turned into narratives. Offhand comments became character critiques. Critics weren't just evaluating tape, they were scanning tone, comparing quotes, hunting for evidence that confirmed their discomfort. That's what King was really spotlighting. Not the mistakes themselves, but how fast the punishment arrives when the mistakes come from the wrong kind of messenger. Because when a white rookie enters the league full of confidence, they call it swagger. When a Black quarterback does the same, people start questioning his leadership abilities before he's even handed a playbook. The bar shifts. The words change. The grace disappears. And that's the real danger, not just the double standard itself, but what it unleashes. Because once a narrative starts, it's almost impossible to kill. He's uncoachable. He doesn't respect the system. He's too flashy. He plays for clicks, not wins. These tags aren't just annoying, they're career-altering. Front offices hear them. Coaches internalize them. Sponsors flinch. Fans repeat them with zero proof, and suddenly the quarterback doesn't just have to earn his job, he has to earn back his humanity. King warned that walking in with an invincible energy might make headlines, but it doesn't build the support system a young quarterback needs. Because in the NFL, development isn't just about arm talent, it's about trust. And if your coaches don't trust you, they won't protect you. If your teammates don't believe in your leadership, they won't speak up when the backlash comes. That protection matters when the game gets ugly, when the interceptions come, when you're 2 seconds late on a read and the media smells blood. In those moments, quarterbacks survive because someone goes to bat for them. Coaches beg for patience. Teammates say, he's still our guy. General managers point to the upside. That's what keeps your name in the game. But when you walk in writing your own legacy, talking big with no margin for error, that grace gets way shorter. At least for most players. At least for players who look like Shedeur. And here's the worst part, the system knows this. The media machine is trained to use personality as a measuring stick. And when young Black quarterbacks show pride, the machine frames it as ego. If they show style, it's framed as immaturity. If they handle themselves like a brand, it's called selfishness. But if a white quarterback does the same, it becomes star power, moxie, or next-level awareness. Same ingredients, entirely different labels. That's why King wasn't attacking the NFL. He was attacking the narratives that have been rigged in plain sight for decades. The piles of adjectives that get thrown at anyone who doesn't play by old rules, and the ways those labels freeze careers before they start. He wasn't asking for immunity. He was asking for balance. Because here's what almost never makes it into those viral takes. Shedeur Sanders hasn't failed anyone. He hasn't burned bridges, blown up locker rooms, or pulled arrogant stunts on field. He's shown up on time, executed under pressure, and carried a level of visibility most 21-year-olds would collapse under. He's done the interviews. He's done the press. He's won games. He's led from inside his own framework, and that is what's being punished. Not failure, non-compliance. So, when King speaks from experience, it's not theoretical. He's lived what happens when your game doesn't speak loud enough to drown out the perceptions. And he knows what it takes to survive when the field becomes a courtroom, and every celebration becomes evidence. He's not warning Shedeur to tone it down out of fear. He's teaching him to play this game too, the one happening in the background. The one where attitude, optics, and legacy collide. Because confidence should never be quieted. But in the NFL, confidence without context doesn't just cost you a headline, it can cost you everything. By now, it should be clear, this debate was never just about one player. Not about Shedeur Sanders, not even about Deion. This was always about something bigger, something harder to name, something that's built into the structure of how football, and the media surrounding it, decides who belongs and who doesn't. Jason Whitlock's argument wasn't isolated. It was just a louder version of what plenty of people already think quietly, that if you want to lead, especially as a quarterback, there's a right way to carry yourself, and anything outside the box is a threat. What he might not realize is how loudly that belief echoes the same old blueprint that told black quarterbacks for decades that their voice, their culture, their energy didn't fit the position. Shaun King understood that blueprint. He lived through it. And in this moment, this viral firestorm over Shedeur's expression, branding, attitude, and perceived rebellion, he saw history trying to repeat itself, not just in what was said, but in what was implied. Because if we're being honest, the image Jason Whitlock posted, a college quarterback and his father framed behind bars and labeled public enemy #1, wasn't just inflammatory design. It was projection. It wasn't about strategy. It was about punishment. It was about reminding them that being confident too soon, too boldly, and too visibly still makes people uncomfortable, even in 2025. And here's the irony Whitlock missed. The system they're supposedly rebelling against, the Sanders family never tried to destroy it. They played it better than anyone. Deion Sanders didn't break the rules of football culture. He studied them, mastered them, and turned them inside out. He took the blueprint handed to him, media appearances, slogans, performance, visibility, and re-engineered it into something modern, something magnetic. He made HBCU football relevant again at Jackson State. He brought ESPN cameras to programs they used to ignore. He flipped recruiting on its head, not just by winning, but by giving players something far more valuable than a spot on the field: attention, spotlight, mentorship, purpose. Then he did it again at Colorado. In year one, he made a program that hadn't mattered for years into the most talked about team in college football. Not because they won every game, but because they made every game count. They brought in culture, conversation, cameras, memes, and for some people, way too much noise. Shedeur didn't just benefit from his father's platform. He contributed to it. He became the focal point on the field in interviews on social media. He was coachable, but not quiet. He learned the system, but didn't shy away from the spotlight. And maybe that's the part that caused some people to short circuit. Because we're still in a world where black excellence is allowed, as long as it doesn't celebrate itself out loud. That's what's really happening here. We're watching a new generation of quarterbacks refuse to play small to make people feel comfortable. They know the game. They know how brands work. They know confidence isn't a cancer. They know it sells. They've learned how to own the moment, to build legacy through engagement, to monetize attention. And instead of being praised the way their white counterparts are, they get framed as threats. Whitlock's discomfort doesn't come from hip-hop invading football. It comes from hip-hop thriving within it and making it better. Flash, flair, and freedom are no longer alternatives to discipline. They're becoming essential parts of leadership. Because what young players today understand is that leadership doesn't always look like silence. Sometimes it looks like stance, style, swagger under pressure. The quarterbacks shaping the next era are not just game managers, they're cultural figures. They don't wait to be chosen, they choose themselves. And that's uncomfortable. Because the NFL and its media environment still wants control. It wants quarterbacks who deliver great sound bites, not social movements. It wants marketability, but not on the player's terms. It wants culture, but watered down, repackaged, and safe. That's why this moment exploded the way it did. Not because Deion and Shedeur did anything outrageous, but because they didn't ask for permission to exist in the spotlight. They didn't wait. And people obsessed with gatekeeping hate it when you skip the line and show success on your own terms. It's not rebellion, it's evolution. That's what Shaun King was really saying. That in this league, mistakes will happen. Picks will be thrown. Games will be lost. And when that happens, every quarterback needs a support system. Not just a coach or a playbook, but a culture that allows them to be human first. Owners will say it's about mental toughness. But how many people ever talk about what it takes to emotionally survive this job when you're not just trying to beat the blitz, but beat a one-size-fits-all standard that was never built for you in the first place? What King was defending wasn't fragility. It was freedom. The freedom to show up fully, chains and all. The freedom to speak boldly even when you're still proving yourself. The freedom to be young and growing without being labeled a problem. That's what makes the difference. That's the real advantage some players walk into the league with, not talent, but the benefit of grace. Space to develop. Space to fail. space to learn publicly without being demonized as a cautionary tale. The truth is, people aren't threatened by bad leadership. They're threatened by unapologetic leadership, especially when it comes in a form they've been trained not to trust. So yes, this conversation was uncomfortable. And maybe that's the point. Because as long as the league and the media ignore why these conversations keep happening, nothing really changes. And until black quarterbacks are allowed to lead differently without being labeled rebellious, we'll keep having the same debate, different name, different face, same fear. But here's the difference this time. People are no longer silent about it. They're not asking to be accepted, they're demanding to be evaluated fairly. And if that makes critics uncomfortable, it's probably because they're finally starting to lose control of the old narrative. So where does all of this leave us? In one sense, this was just another week in sports media. Another Twitter fight. Another round of hot takes. But the moment Jason Whitlock posted that image, and the moment Shaun King answered it, this became something much bigger than football. It became a mirror. One that forced us all to look straight at a truth we keep finding ways to avoid, that we still don't know what to do when a young black leader refuses to stand in someone else's mold. For generations, the quarterback position was built around control, both on the field and off. The voice in the huddle was supposed to sound a certain way. The image on media day was supposed to look a certain way. And any athlete, especially a black one, who dared to challenge that visual, that style, was more likely to be called a distraction than a leader. But the game has already changed. Today's quarterbacks aren't just throwers. They're marketers. They're culture connectors. They're emotional anchors and brand strategists, playing chess on a digital board where millions of people have opinions, but very few understand the full weight of what it takes to lead under a microscope. Especially when being a leader means carrying years of collective perception on your back. Shedeur Sanders isn't perfect. No one is. He will have missteps. He will say things that fuel critics. He'll take hits, both literal and metaphorical, that test who he really is. But that's the point. Why is he being asked to be perfect before he's even allowed to fail? That burden of early perfection is rarely carried by white quarterbacks. They get room to stumble, space to find themselves. They get to grow up under center without having their swagger turned into spectacle. And when they talk big, they're confident. When Shedeur does it, he's cocky. When they market themselves, it's smart branding. When he does it, it's me-first behavior. When they personalize their game with music, style, drama, it's charisma. When he does it, he's not serious enough. It's not equal, it's not unbiased, and it's definitely not just football. The debate between Shaun King and Jason Whitlock might fade from headlines tomorrow, but the lines it exposed aren't going anywhere. They cut through highlight reels and combine stats. They live in locker rooms, front offices, comment sections. And unless we call them out, they keep shaping the conversation, quietly deciding who gets to lead freely and who's forced to translate every gesture through a filter of respectability. Because here's what we should be evaluating: composure under pressure, work ethic behind the scenes, tape, timing, decision-making in the fourth quarter, accountability after losses. The things that actually build a future quarterback. But that's not what this controversy was about, was it? It was about image. An image has always been a weapon disguised as a standard. You can't explain Jason Whitlock's post by calling it critique. You can't justify prison bars and crosshairs over a young quarterback by calling it truth. That visual wasn't analysis. It was fear in Photoshop. That was someone telling the world that confidence coming from the wrong face, in the wrong form, is still public enemy number one. That's why Shaun King pushed back so hard. Not because he believes every young player should be unfiltered with no accountability, but because he knows that filtering only ever cuts one way. And eventually, if nobody speaks up, silence becomes compliance, and the next Shedeur gets labeled before he ever gets a shot. So what now? Does the NFL evolve with the players shaping its future, or does it keep trying to tame them? Do we embrace culture as part of athletic identity, or keep punishing it for not fitting a blueprint made decades ago? Do we finally accept that leadership comes in more than one form, or keep narrowing the definition until only the familiar feels comfortable? This moment forced people to ask those questions. Fans are tired of pretending there's one right way to carry yourself. Players are tired of being boxed in, and even viewers, especially younger ones, are done with the coded language. They want truth, they want personality, they want quarterbacks who represent more than just formations. They want confidence to be celebrated, not condemned. Shedeur Sanders, like many quarterbacks before him, isn't asking for sympathy. He's asking for fairness. For the chance to lead the way others do, authentically, unapologetically, without having to erase identity just to earn respect. Because let's be honest, the league is changing whether critics like it or not. The quarterbacks of tomorrow will speak differently, dress differently, celebrate differently. They will come from new backgrounds, bring new energy, and challenge the old definitions of what professional looks like. That's not chaos, that's progress. And the NFL will be better for it. This moment, the clash, the outrage, the silence it broke was necessary, because growth never comes from comfort. It comes from confrontation. It comes from uncomfortable conversations. From people like Shaun King forcing issues into the light. From athletes like Shedeur refusing to apologize for being exactly who they are. We don't need quarterbacks molded in silence anymore. We need quarterbacks who are bold enough to embrace every part of what and who they represent. Swagger and stats, style and substance, faith and fire. That's not weakness, that's strength. The league can either keep clinging to an outdated ideal and punish players for stepping outside it, or it can evolve and move forward with the new generation that's already shaping what football will become. Because the future of leadership doesn't whisper, it shows up. Loud, proud, unapologetic. And whether media voices like it or not, that future isn't waiting for permission. It's already here.